So today I want to talk to you about calendars. We've heard a lot on the internet about people keep this calendar or that calendar, but what I want to show you is if you only had the scriptures, how would you keep the biblical feast? A lot of people use what is called the Gregorian calendar, and then some people use the Hebrew calendar here, and then there's some people that use the Duk calendar right here. Now, one interesting thing, and it's not really related to the video, but
here you have the Gregorian, the Hebrew, and the Zadok calendars that most people use. Notice that from left to right, they all have the seventh day as Saturday, as you see in these columns. So in this aspect, all of these calendars are in agreement. It is also interesting to note that in their heliocentric model, if you include the sun, Saturn is number 7 in order, just like Saturday on their calendar.
But what if you didn't have any of these calendars and you were in hypothetically, let's say you were in a coma and you woke up. But what if you were out here in the middle of nowhere? You didn't know what day it was, you didn't know what month it was, and you didn't know what time of year it was. Obviously, you can look around right now. We're not in the wintertime because there's a lot of foliage growing around me, a lot of small brush growing. So we know what season we're in, but we don't know kind of the exact date. How would you keep your biblical feast? In this video, I like to show you, but just using scripture, not using any calendar, how could you keep accurately the biblical feast?
All throughout Scripture, there are only 2 seasons, summer and winter, cold and heat. This represents a time to plant and a time to harvest. Our festivals to Yahuwah are based on this principle of laying seed and bearing fruit. Bereshith, Genesis 8:22. As long as the earth remains, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. TEHILLIM, Psalms 74:17. You have set all the borders of the earth. You have made summer and winter. The seasons also represent a time to be born and a time to die, as seen in TEHILLIM, Ecclesiastes 3:1. For every matter there is an appointed time, even a time for every pursuit under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot. Notice that in this passage, a time to be born represents the planting season, and a time to die represents the harvest. This is why we call it the dead of winter. This will help us to understand what is written in Amos 5:8. He who made the Kemah and Kisil, and who turns the shadow of death into morning and darkened day into night, who is calling for the waters of the sea and pours them out on the face of the earth. Yahuwah is his name. The shadow of death represents the winter season, and the morning represents the growing season. The 2 seasons of the word. Song of Songs, chapter 2, verse 11. For look, the winter is past, the rain is over, gone. The flowers have appeared in the earth. The time of singing has come, and the voice of the turtle dove has been heard in our land. At the end of this chapter it says this: until the day breaks and the shadows have fled, turn, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountain of Bethur. This shows the relationship with winter as the shadow of death as seen in Amos 5. He who made the Kemah and Kasil and turns the shadow of death into morning and the darkened day into night, who is calling for the waters of the sea and pours them out on the face of the earth. Yahweh is his name. The Kemah in this passage is the Pleiades, and the Kasil in this passage is Orion. Quote, the Pleiades are winter stars and are visible from the northern hemisphere between October and April. They're visible all night during November and December, making this the best time to spot them. The end of winter, the shadow of death, and the beginning of summer is marked by the Pleiades, just as what is written in Ayub, Job 38:31. Do you bind the bands of Kemah or loosen the cords of Kasil? Do you bring out the constellations in its season, or do you lead the bear with its sons? Do you know the laws of the heavens, or do you set their rule over the earth? The Kemah is the Pleiades, and the Kasil in this passage is the Orion. These two star clusters are placed together in Scripture because to locate the Pleiades, you must first find Orion's belt. Quote, in the night sky, the Pleiades sits within the constellation of Taurus. It's actually possible to see up to 14 of the stars with the naked eye in areas with no light pollution. You can see the Pleiades between October and April, but the best month to look for them is November, when it can be seen for the entire night. To find the Pleiades, first locate the 3 stars in Orion's belt. During November, look above the eastern horizon from about 10 p.m. Draw an imaginary line going through the belt from left to right, and continue this line through Orion's bow. This will direct you to the brightest star in Taurus, Aldebaran. Past Aldebaran in the same direction is Pleiades. It's easily recognizable because of the position of its 5 brightest stars. Make it look like a tiny version of the plow. Notice in the 32nd verse of Job 38 that it says, do you bring out the constellations in its season? We know that the Father spoke this because at the beginning of this chapter it says that Yahweh spoke out of the whirlwind. Job 38:1. Then Yahweh answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? This is Yahweh telling us that the Kemah and Kasil marks the seasons. This is the calendar that he has given man, a calendar that is written in the heavens for all to see. Bereshith, Genesis 1:14. And Elohim said, let lights come to be in the expanse of the heavens, to separate the day from night, and let them be for signs and appointed times, and for days and years. For thousands of years, mankind has used this ancient calendar to help them survive and to know when to plant and when to harvest. Quote, in South Africa, the Pleiades were called Isi Lamela and were the digging stars, whose appearance in southern Africa warned of the need to begin hoeing the ground. All over Africa, these stars were used as a marker of the growing season. In Ukrainian folklore, the Pleiades are known as Stolhari. Stolhari has the meaning of a granary, storehouse for hay and crops, or can be used to reduce to the root of stolzar, meaning hundredfold growing or 100 embers. Quote, in the ancient Andes, the Pleiades were associated with abundance because they returned to the southern hemisphere sky each year at harvest time. In Quechua, they are called Kulaka, or storehouse. Quote, in China, the earliest recorded reference to the Pleiades may be in Chinese astronomical literature dating from 2357 BCE. For agricultural tribes in the northern hemisphere, the course of the Pleiades indicated the beginning and ending of growing seasons. Quote, in Malay archipelago, the star cluster was known as Bintang Teju, or seven stars. It is a marker in the traditional rice planting season in Kedah for sowing paddy seeds. Quote, in the Philippines, the Pleiades are known as Moraporo, meaning either the boiling lights or a flock of birds. Its appearance signifies a new agricultural season and thus starts the preparation for the new planting season. Quote, the heliacal near-dawn rising of the Pleiades in spring in the northern hemisphere has marked from ancient times the opening of seafaring and farming seasons, as the morning setting of the group in autumn signifies the season end. Some South American Indians use the same word for Pleiades and year. So, if you were in the wilderness, knowing these scriptures as mentioned in Bereshith, Job, and Amos, knowing that the Pleiades marks the beginning of the growing season and the beginning of the harvest, you can start your scriptural calendar by this information, and here is how. The Pleiades falls behind the sun to mark the last frost of the year. This was used by the ancients to know when to plant the crops that were easily destroyed by the frost. This year, the Pleiades disappeared or fell behind the sun on May 19th, as shown here on the Stellarium app, which I will leave a link in the description. The last full moon before the disappearance of the Pleiades this year was April 23rd, as shown here. The next full moon would occur after the disappearance of the Pleiades on May 23rd. So the full moon of April 23rd would mark the Passover for 2024. That started on the eve of April 22nd this year, going until April the 30th. There was a last frost on April the 23rd this year, showing that this was the correct date for Passover, because first fruits occurred on April 28 after the last frost. For if you had planted your first fruits before this date, it could have been killed by the frost, and you would have had no wave offering for Yahweh for Sabaoth, or Pentecost, which is 50 days from first fruits. This is the barley harvest. Barley takes about 50 days to produce fruit. Quote, how long does barley take to grow? Barley needs approximately 50 to 90 days to mature, depending on the variety and the time of year it is planted. Spring barley is harvested sooner than fall planted. Now, if you were in the late part of the season and needed to know how to set your calendar, you would watch for the Pleiades to rise to its peak, which occurs this year on October. Quote, we first encountered the Pleiades setting in the west in early springtime. See early spring night sky session after Orion Nebula. It was setting in the west because it's located in Taurus next to our familiar winter constellation Orion in autumn beginning in October. It is visible rising in the east well after astronomical twilight. The Pleiades are winter stars and are visible from the northern hemisphere between October and April. They're visible all night during November and December, making this the best time to spot them. April marks the Passover and October ends the growing season. The Passover represents a new beginning, and Sukkot represents the festival of the harvest. Quote, the Pleiades can be seen sometime during the night throughout the year, except in late April and May. Each day they rise and set 4 minutes earlier. So Pleiades rising yields a wide range of dates, narrowing the range to Pleiades rising in the evening sky. We find September and October to be in line with tradition. They divided the year into two seasons, the Matari or Pleiades. The first they called Matari in Naya, Pleiades above. It commenced when in the evening these stars appeared on or near the horizon, and the half year during which immediately after sunset they were seen above the horizon. The other season commenced when at sunset the stars were invisible and continued until at that hour they appeared again above the horizon. Each year the Pleiades rises in the east before the first frost, around October the 16th. This can be seen as you look to the east at the setting of the sun. This marks Sukkot, for if you look for the full moon before this event, you are at the festival of Sukkot. For instance, in 2020, Sukkot was on the evening of Friday, October the 2nd. This was the last full moon before the rising of the Pleiades. Now let's look at another example of Sukkot in 2023. Notice that in 2023 that the last full moon before the rising was September and not October. Sukkot was held on the evening of Friday, September 29th through Friday, October the 6th. Ayub, Job 38:31. Do you bind the bands of Kamal or loosen the cords of Kasil? Do you bring out the constellations in its season, or do you lead the bear with its sons? Do you know the laws of the heavens, or do you set their rule over the earth? The Pleiades marks the feast of Yahweh and gives us a sign in the Shamaim, so that even without a paper calendar, we can accurately keep his feast. A calendar that is uncorrupted by man, the true calendar of the Word. This year is a special Sukkot, and here is why. The Pleiades rises on October the 16th, and Sukkot begins on that same day. A perfect alignment for this year's festival to Yahweh. All praises to the Almighty. May Yahweh bless you and keep you, and make his face shine upon you, and give you shalom.